Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to step into a world where a single glance across a crowded ballroom could decide your entire future? A world where your fortune, your happiness, and your family's honor could be won or lost in the space of a single waltz. It seems like a scene from a fantasy, but it was once a vivid reality. Tonight, we leave our modern world behind and travel back to such a time. We are going to an era of breathtaking elegance, strict rules, and deep, hidden passions. So, find a comfortable spot and let the sounds of your world fade away. It's always so lovely to know where our stories are traveling to. I'm curious, where in the world are you listening from tonight, and what time is it for you? It's a wonderful thought, all of us settling in together from different corners of the globe. Now, get cozy, close your eyes if you wish, and prepare to enter the vibrant heart of Victorian England. Welcome to Sleeping Scribe, where calming history stories help you unwind and gently fall asleep. Tonight, our story begins not in a dusty book, but amidst the shimmering glow of 1,000 candles, the swell of an orchestra, and the hopeful heartbeats of London's high society. We have just arrived at the social event of the season. The journey here has been a slow one. Our carriage, one of hundreds, has been inching its way through the fashionable streets of Mayfair for what feels like hours. This is the height of the London season, a frantic, glittering period that runs from late January until the heat of July. It coincides with Parliament's session. Outside the carriage window, the night air is cool. The rhythmic clatter of horses' hooves on the damp cobblestones provides a constant drumming beat. You can hear the rumble of countless iron-rimmed wheels and the sharp, clear calls of coachmen navigating the chaos. For a moment, it feels like the entire city is trying to squeeze through this one elegant street. This is a traffic jam of a different age, a slow-moving river of polished lacquer, fine horses, and private ambitions. Finally, our carriage lurches forward one last time. It pulls up before a magnificent townhouse, its stone facade glowing in the night. The entire building is ablaze with light. Gas lamps mounted by the grand entrance hiss softly, casting a brilliant, modern glare. They are joined by dozens of lanterns placed along the windowsills, turning the house into a beacon of warmth and welcome. A great canvas awning stretches from the doorway to the curb, a thoughtful protection from the unpredictable London weather. A footman, perfectly poised, steps forward to open our door. He is dressed in an immaculate livery, the specific uniform of the host family. His coat is a deep crimson, its cuffs and collar heavy with golden braid. His powdered wig is flawless. He is a living, breathing symbol of the immense wealth required to orchestrate an evening like this. The presence of many such men, stationed at every door and stairway, is a quiet but powerful statement of status. Before we even step inside, we must present our invitation. It is a beautiful thing, a card of thick, creamy paper with gilded edges. The details of the ball are etched in exquisite, swirling script, a work of art in itself. This card was not sent by post. It was hand-delivered by a servant weeks ago, and it is our essential key to this exclusive world. Without it, these grand doors would remain firmly closed. We step from the carriage, and the first thing we notice is the change in temperature. The cool night air is instantly replaced by a wave of enveloping warmth that rushes out to greet us. It carries with it a complex and intoxicating perfume. You can smell the sweet, heady scent of expensive floral perfumes worn by the ladies. The entrance hall is a crush of bodies. Guests are everywhere, their voices a low, excited murmur. We see gowns in every color imaginable, vibrant silks, deep velvets, and frothy satins rustling with every movement. Above the crowd, a colossal gaselier, a chandelier lit by gas, hangs from the ceiling. As ladies, our first stop is a dedicated cloakroom. It is a sanctuary of relative calm, a place to make final adjustments before the grand entrance. Here, maids assist with removing heavy outer cloaks. We can check our reflection in the tall mirrors, ensuring not a single hair is out of place, and adjust the delicate satin of our long gloves. Now, we are ready. We join the slow procession of guests moving toward the main staircase. At the top, the hosts are waiting. They stand as a formal reception line, greeting each and every guest personally as they arrive. This is their duty, and a mark of good breeding. As we reach the threshold of the ballroom itself, a butler, his voice like a thunderclap, announces our names. It is a moment of both pride and intense vulnerability. For a split second, every head in the room turns. Every eye is upon us. We are being seen, assessed, and placed within the complex social hierarchy of the room. This is the true beginning of the night. Among the crowd, we see several young women dressed in gowns of pure, virginal white. These are the debutantes, making their very first appearance in society. The white of their dresses is a symbol representing their purity and their eligibility on the marriage market. For them, tonight is everything. Their futures hang in the balance, resting on the impression they make in these few short hours. The pressure upon them is immense. It is impossible not to be awed by the sheer scale of it all. The expense of hosting a single ball like this was truly astronomical. It could cost the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of dollars in today's currency. Every detail, from the French champagne to the wages for the orchestra, represented an enormous investment. It was an investment in status, in influence, and in the future of one's own family. Now, having been announced, our attention is drawn to the heart of the event. The music swells, and we look towards the dance floor. There, under the glittering chandeliers, the intricate rituals of courtship are already underway. It is a beautiful, dizzying sight, a whirlwind of color and movement. In our hands, we hold the most important tool for navigating this complex world: a dance card. It is a small, delicate booklet. Its cover might be made of ivory or mother of pearl, decorated with a painted floral design. Attached by a silken cord is a tiny pencil, sharpened to a perfect point. Inside, the pages are printed with a list of the evening's dances in their proper order: the waltz, the polka, the quadrille. This little card is a blueprint for success or failure. For a young lady, particularly a debutante, a full dance card is the ultimate prize. It is a tangible measure of her popularity. The goal is to have every single slot filled before the orchestra even plays its first note. An empty card, or one with many open spaces, is a quiet but devastating social humiliation. It means being relegated to the sidelines. All around us, the game is being played. We see young gentlemen, their expressions a mixture of confidence and hope, approaching ladies. They bow formally, with a polite murmur. A gentleman will ask, "May I have the honor of this dance?" If the lady accepts with a nod and a smile, he will take her card and carefully write his name in an empty slot next to a waltz or a quadrille. This is a binding contract. To break a dance engagement written on the card is a serious offense. a breach of etiquette that would not be easily forgiven. The first dance of the evening, and often the very last, hold special significance. These are usually reserved. A young woman might save them for a particularly favored suitor, a gentleman she is genuinely interested in, or, out of courtesy, she may grant one to the son of the host family. Every choice is a strategic move, a signal to the ever-watchful eyes in the room. And those eyes are everywhere. Seated on gilded chairs lining the walls of the ballroom are the chaperones. These are the guardians of virtue, typically older, married female relatives. A mother, an aunt, a widowed grandmother. No unmarried young woman would ever be allowed to attend such an event without one. Her presence is non-negotiable. The chaperones form a formidable line of defense. Their gazes are sharp, missing nothing. They observe every interaction, every whispered word, every lingering glance. They are the keepers of reputation, ensuring that all interactions remain within the strict bounds of propriety. Their silent approval or disapproval can make or break a potential match. Before a gentleman can even ask a young lady to dance, he must first approach her chaperone. He is required to make polite conversation, to greet her with respect, and to essentially ask her permission. Only then may he turn his attention to her young charge. It is a ritual that reinforces the social order, a reminder that the young woman is under protection. The music begins, and the floor fills with dancers. The most popular dance of the evening is the waltz. It is hard for us to imagine now, but the waltz was once considered quite scandalous. The close proximity of the partners, his hand on her waist, their bodies moving as one, was shocking to earlier generations. But by this time, its intoxicating, swirling rhythm has conquered the ballroom. It is the most intimate and romantic dance of all. We also see the quadrille being performed. This is a much more formal and intricate affair. It is a square dance, involving 4 couples moving through a complex series of patterns and figures. It requires concentration and coordination, a dance of the mind as much as the body. And then there is the polka, a lively, bouncing dance that brings a burst of energy to the room. Each dance has its own character, its own set of rules. As we watch, we feel the tension in the air. For the young men and women, this is not just a party. It is a high-stakes negotiation. A gentleman must be careful not to show too much attention to one lady, unless his intentions are serious. A lady must balance her dance card, being careful not to offend one suitor by favoring another too obviously. It is a delicate, strategic performance. The anxiety is palpable. We see the hopeful glances of a young woman as a handsome gentleman approaches her group. We feel the slight knot in her stomach as she waits, hoping her dance card will be filled. The weight of her chaperone's gaze is a constant presence, a reminder that she is always being judged. This glittering ballroom is not just a place of pleasure. It is a place of profound social pressure. With the dance card as our guide, we now turn our attention to the other conversations happening all around us. These are conversations that use a language far more subtle than words. They are spoken in silence, through the graceful and deliberate movement of an essential accessory, the fan. In the warm, crowded ballroom, a fan is a practical tool, but here it is so much more. It is a device for secret communication, a way to have a clandestine conversation in plain sight, under the watchful eyes of the chaperones. The fan allows for a daring and playful game of flirtation, invitation, and rejection to unfold. This secret language, though perhaps embellished by the fan makers who promoted it, was a very real part of the social scene. It was a shared code, understood by the young men and women who moved in these circles. A simple gesture could carry a world of meaning. The way a fan was held, opened, or closed could convey a message that could never be spoken aloud. Imagine a young lady standing near the wall. A gentleman across the room has caught her eye. She wants to signal her interest, but she cannot simply call out to him. Instead, she holds her fan open with her left hand. The message is clear and direct. Come and talk to me. It is a silent invitation, a flicker of possibility cast across the crowded room. Perhaps the gentleman begins to make his way towards her, but as he does, she sees her chaperone looking in their direction. The young lady must now send a warning. She begins to twirl the fan in her left hand. The motion is subtle, almost careless, but the meaning is urgent. We are being watched. The gentleman understands. He slows his approach, or perhaps turns to speak with someone else, waiting for a more opportune moment. The fan could also deliver a simple yes or no. If, after a dance, a gentleman asks if he might call on her the next day, she could give her answer without a word. By placing the fan against her right cheek, she signals yes. Placing it against her left cheek means a polite but firm no. It is a conversation held in absolute silence, a perfect way to navigate a delicate request. The gestures could become even more daring. Carrying the fan in her right hand, held in front of her face, was an audacious command. Follow me. It was an instruction to meet her in a more secluded spot, perhaps on a terrace or in a quiet alcove, away from prying eyes. And for a true declaration of love, a young lady could press her closed fan to her heart. This was the most serious message of all. It meant, "You have won, my love." Of course, the fan could also be used to express displeasure. Drawing the fan slowly across her forehead was a sign of annoyance. Or, if she wished to end a conversation, she could snap her fan shut with a sharp, definitive click. The sound, though small, could be as final as a closing door. Even dropping a fan could be a deliberate act. It signaled a desire for friendship, a way to initiate a conversation under the guise of a gentleman's polite assistance in retrieving it. These fans were not simple objects. They were masterpieces of craftsmanship. Their handles, known as sticks, were carved from ivory, tortoiseshell, or shimmering mother-of-pearl. The fan's leaf was made of fine silk, delicate lace, or soft kid leather. Many were hand-painted by skilled artists, depicting romantic pastoral scenes, classical myths, or intricate floral patterns. They were as much a piece of jewelry as a dress or a tiara. Holding one, you can feel its delicate, lightweight construction, the smooth, cool feel of the ivory sticks against your gloved hand. You can see the glint of candlelight on the gilded struts that hold it together. The whisper of silk as you flick it open is a sound full of promise and intrigue. This silent language, this secret code of gestures, added a thrilling layer of mystery to the ballroom. It was a game of wits, played out in the open, allowing young hearts to connect in a world that tried so hard to keep them apart. As the clock on the mantelpiece nears midnight, a change begins to sweep through the ballroom. The orchestra plays a final note, and the dancing ceases for a time. A gentle but persistent current begins to pull the guests out of the main ballroom and towards an adjoining series of rooms. It is time for the midnight supper. This is a pivotal moment in the evening. It is a break from the formal dancing, a chance for more relaxed and extended conversation away from the noise of the orchestra. Here, Over plates of lavish food, alliances are forged, gossip is exchanged, and reputations can be either polished or tarnished. To leave the ball before supper was considered a great insult to the hosts, a clear sign that you were not enjoying their hospitality. We enter the supper room, and the sight is one of stunning abundance. A long, massive table dominates the center of the room, groaning under the weight of countless silver platters. The air is thick with the most delicious aromas. You can smell the rich, savory scent of roasted meats and game pies, the salty tinks of the sea from platters of fresh oysters, and the sweet, fruity perfume of towering jellies and trifles. The spread is extravagant. There are cold chickens, sliced hams, and elaborate lobster salads. There are quivering molds of jellied and towers of delicate pastries. It is a feast designed to impress, another powerful display of the host's wealth and generosity. The sheer variety and quantity of the food is breathtaking. In the candlelight, the towering molded jellies shimmer like giant jewels. The supper is typically served as a standing buffet. Guests mingle and move through the room, balancing their plates. However, navigating the crowded room with a plate and a glass is considered unladylike. Therefore, etiquette demands that a gentleman fetches supper for his female companion. He must ask her what she desires, fill a plate for her, and find her a place to sit or stand comfortably before getting his own food. This simple act of service provides a crucial opportunity. It allows a couple to spend a significant amount of time together. A gentleman can use this chance to engage a lady in conversation, to learn more about her interests, and to display his own charm and attentiveness. It is a moment of focused interaction, a welcome change from the fleeting minutes of a single dance, and the conversation is truly an art form. There are strict, unspoken rules about what can and cannot be discussed. All topics must be light, pleasant, and entirely uncontroversial. Talk of politics or religion is absolutely forbidden. To discuss money, business, or the cost of anything is considered the height of vulgarity. The goal is to be witty, engaging, and utterly agreeable. Instead, conversations drift towards safer, more cultured subjects. One might discuss the latest installment of a novel by Charles Dickens, which everyone would be reading. A recent art exhibition, or the beautiful weather are all acceptable topics. Polite, well-informed gossip about mutual acquaintances is also a common currency, but it must be handled with care. Compliments are exchanged, but they must be subtle and elegantly phrased. A gentleman would never say something too forward or overly familiar. Instead of telling a lady she looks beautiful, he might compliment her exquisite taste in choosing the color of her gown or the grace with which she danced the waltz. It is a language of understatement and refinement. Of course, not everyone is a master of this art, and for some, the supper is a painful experience. Along the walls, away from the bustling tables, we might see a few young women sitting quietly. They are the wallflowers. These are the ladies who were not asked to dance, whose cards remained tragically empty. For them, the evening has been a social failure. The supper only highlights their isolation as they watch others laugh and converse. It is a dreaded fate, a public marking of being unwanted. It is a centerpiece of the refreshments, and its effects can certainly help to loosen tongues as the night wears on. Beside it, servants in livery are constantly opening bottles of champagne, the pop of the corks providing a celebratory soundtrack to the hum of conversation. The crisp, cold fizz of the champagne is a perfect counterpoint to the rich food. This interval of food and talk is more than just a meal. It is the social heart of the evening. It is where a young man can truly assess a potential partner, judging her wit, her intelligence, and her social graces. And it is where a young woman can showcase her charm and her ability to converse elegantly. In this wondrous, sociable crush of people, futures are being quietly but decisively shaped. As the night winds down and guests begin to depart, the true purpose of the evening crystallizes. It was never just about music and dancing. It was a complex and powerful ritual. It was about the subtle but relentless consolidation of a social order. A world where everyone understands their place and the intricate rules that bind them all together. It was a grand spectacle, designed to see and be seen, to judge and be judged. The world of the Victorian ball was a universe unto itself, with its own language, rules, and stars. It's fascinating to think about. If you could attend such a ball, what role would you imagine for yourself? The observant wallflower, the sought-after debutante, or the master of witty conversation? Let me know in the comments below. For now, let the last notes of the waltz fade as we transition from the dazzling night to the quiet light of day. The exhilarating chaos of the ballroom fades like the last notes of a waltz. The shimmering candlelight gives way to the soft, gray light of a London morning. Our story now moves from the grand public stage to the quiet, intimate world of the Victorian home. Here, we will discover a different kind of poetry, one written not in grand gestures, but in the small, intricate rituals that gave structure and meaning to the everyday. The day truly begins, not with the sunrise, but with a sound. It is the soft thud of the morning post dropping through the letterbox in the front door. In an age before telephones or instant messages, this was the moment the outside world arrived. It was the vital link to friends, to family, to news, and to the intricate web of social obligations that held their world together. The arrival of the mail was a small but significant event, awaited with quiet anticipation. Communication was an art form, and its primary medium was the letter. The entire system had been transformed in 1840 by a man named Rowland Hill and his revolutionary idea, the penny post. Before this, postage was expensive and paid by the recipient, creating a barrier to communication. But the penny post, with its affordable, prepaid stamps, opened the floodgates. Suddenly, almost everyone could afford to send and receive letters. In a city like London, the effect was astonishing. Mail could be delivered not just once, but multiple times a day. It was possible to send a letter in the morning and receive a reply that very afternoon. This created a rapid-fire correspondence that functioned almost like a slower version of modern-day texting. Invitations, thank you notes, gossip, and confessions could fly back and forth across the city with incredible speed, weaving a constant, invisible tapestry of connection. After breakfast, a lady of the house would often dedicate her morning to her correspondence. She would retreat to a special piece of furniture, a small, elegant writing desk, sometimes called a davenport. Here, all the necessary tools were laid out in perfect order. There was a pot of deep black or blue ink, its sharp, metallic scent hanging faintly in the air. There was blotting paper to prevent smudges, and of course, the pen itself. This was not the feathered quill of a previous era. By this time, the preferred instrument was a dip pen with a sharp steel nib. This nib was fitted into a holder of wood or bone, and it had to be dipped into the inkwell every few words. Writing a letter was a physical, deliberate process. You can almost hear the steady, rhythmic scratch of the steel nib as it moves across the surface of the paper, a quiet and focused sound that filled many a morning parlor. The paper itself was important. For personal letters, one used high-quality, heavy, creamy paper. To save on this paper, and on the cost of postage, which was based on weight, a curious practice known as cross-writing was common. After filling a page in the normal way, the writer would turn it 90 degrees and write a new set of lines directly over the first. The result was a dense, grid-like pattern of words that could be difficult to read, but it allowed one to fit twice the information onto a single sheet. Every letter was a carefully constructed performance, and it had to follow strict rules. There were established formulas for openings and closings that depended entirely on your relationship with the recipient. A letter to a family member might begin with "My dearest mother," while a more formal business letter required a distant "Dear Sir." The closing was even more telling. One might sign off to a close friend as "yours affectionately," but to a social superior, a phrase like "I remain your most humble and obedient servant" was required to show proper deference. Before the mid-century, envelopes were not yet in common use. Instead, a letter was a self-contained package. After it was written and cross-written, it would be carefully folded into a small, tight rectangle. To secure it, a stick of colored sealing wax would be held over a candle flame. As the wax melted, a warm, smoky aroma would fill the air. A drop of the sticky, molten wax was allowed to fall onto the paper, and before it cooled, it was impressed with a personal seal, perhaps bearing a family crest or an initial. This was not just for security. It was another form of communication. The color of the wax carried its own meaning. Red was the most common, used for business or friendly correspondence. White was reserved for the most formal announcements, such as a wedding, and black wax was used exclusively during a period of mourning, its somber color signaling the sad news contained within before the letter was even opened. Of course, the content of the letter was only part of the message. The handwriting itself was seen as a profound reflection of one's character. Good penmanship was a sign of a genteel education and a disciplined mind. For women, in particular, a beautiful, flowing script, known as copperplate, was an essential accomplishment. Poor, messy handwriting was not just a practical failing. It was viewed as a sign of a disorderly mind or even a moral weakness. The intricate loops and curls of perfect script were a visual testament to the writer's refinement. Even after the letter was sealed and addressed, there was one last chance for a secret message, a playful, clandestine code developed around the postage stamp itself. This language of stamps allowed sender and receiver to share a secret under the very nose of the postal service. The angle at which the stamp was placed on the envelope conveyed a specific meaning. A stamp placed upside down, for example, was a daring declaration, "I love you." A stamp tilted to the right meant, "Do you love me?" while one tilted to the left replied, "Yes." It was a secret game, a final hidden layer of meaning in the art of the letter. This morning ritual of correspondence was a quiet, reflective time. It was an act of concentration, composing one's thoughts and translating them into elegant prose. It was a moment of connection, maintaining the bonds of family and friendship across distances. And it was a moment of anticipation, wondering what news, what invitations, or what secrets the next delivery from the morning post might bring. After the morning's correspondence was complete, the social duties of the day would begin. This often started with a ritual that was both a fundamental social obligation and a complex strategic game. It was the formal and often baffling practice known as the morning call. It was a highly structured system of visits that governed the social lives of the upper and middle classes. First, one must understand the name. A morning call did not actually take place in the morning. The term was a curious holdover from an earlier time when the main meal of the day was eaten much earlier. By the Victorian era, these calls took place in the afternoon, typically between the hours of 3 and 5. This was the designated window for polite society to circulate and maintain its connections. This was not a casual visit. It was an intricate dance with a very strict choreography. A formal call was expected to last for a precise amount of time. 15 minutes was considered ideal. 20 minutes was the absolute maximum. To stay any longer was a serious breach of etiquette, a sign of poor breeding. The entire visit was designed to be brief and formal, a symbolic gesture rather than a deep conversation. A lady would not simply be available for visitors at any time. She would have a specific at-home day each week. This was the day she would remain in her formal drawing room, ready to receive anyone who might call. To visit a person on a day other than her at-home day was considered a great intrusion, unless you were a very intimate friend. The system brought order to the chaos of social life. The most important element in this entire ritual was a small, simple object, the calling card. This was a social passport. It was a small piece of thick, stiff card, professionally engraved with one's name. Sometimes it might also include an address or, for a gentleman, the name of his club. The design was to be simple and elegant. A gentleman's card was always smaller than a lady's, a subtle reflection of the social hierarchy. The name on the card was also significant. A married woman's card did not bear her own first name. Instead, it bore her husband's. She was not Mrs. Jane Smith, but Mrs. John Smith. Her social identity was inextricably linked to his. This small detail on a piece of card spoke volumes about the structure of their society. When making a call, the process was exact. You would arrive at the house and hand your calling card to the servant who answered the door. If the lady of the house was at home, you would be shown into the drawing room. If she was not receiving visitors, or was genuinely out, you would simply leave your card. This act alone fulfilled the social obligation. It was proof that you had made the effort to call. Even the card itself had a language. Bending or folding a corner conveyed a specific message to the recipient. Turning down the top right corner indicated that you had delivered the card in person rather than sending it with a servant. Turning down the top left corner was a way to send congratulations, perhaps for a recent marriage or birth in the family. If a card had PPC written on it, it stood for the French phrase pour prendre congé, and it meant the person was leaving town for an extended period. Back inside the home, these collected cards were a source of great pride. In the entry hall, a lady would keep a special silver tray or an ornate porcelain basket. This was not just for storage, it was for display. The cards of the most important and prestigious visitors would be placed on top for all subsequent visitors to see. The collection of cards on the tray was a tangible measure of a family's social standing. It was a public record of who you knew. and therefore who you were. Inside the drawing room, the 15-minute visit unfolded. A visitor would be perched on the edge of a formal chair, maintaining a perfectly upright posture. Conversation was light and polite. One would comment on the weather or a recent concert, but never on anything too personal or controversial. All the while, the quiet ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall seemed to count down the seconds, a constant reminder of the visit's fleeting nature. The entire experience had a slight air of awkwardness, the pressure to be pleasant in a highly artificial environment. This system, which seems so rigid to us, was the very foundation of their social world. It was how people maintained their networks, repaid social debts from parties and dinners, and constantly signaled their place in the complex social order. It was a formal, methodical, and essential part of daily life. Following the stiff obligations of the morning call, a far more relaxed and beloved ritual often took place. As the afternoon wore on, it was time for a gentle pause, a moment of comfort that has become one of the most enduring symbols of the era. It was time for afternoon tea. This was so much more than just a snack. It was a cornerstone of domestic life, a comforting anchor in the day, and a perfect stage for a hostess to display her grace and hospitality. The tradition is largely credited to one woman, Anna, the 7th Duchess of Bedford, in the early 1840s. At the time, the evening meal was being served later and later, often not until 8 or 9 at night. The Duchess found herself suffering from a sinking feeling in the late afternoon. Her solution was to order a tray of tea, bread and butter, and cakes to her room. She soon began inviting friends to join her, and the delightful custom quickly spread throughout high society. It is important to understand the distinction between low tea and high tea. What we often picture, the delicate affair in the drawing room, is properly called low tea. It was named for the low tables, like coffee tables, that it was served upon. High tea, on the other hand, was a very different thing. It was a much more substantial meal, eaten by the working classes in the early evening. It was served at the main dining table, or the high table, and would combine tea with hearty dishes like meat, pies, fish, or potatoes. It was a worker's supper, not an aristocrat's snack. For our purposes, we are enjoying a proper low tea. A gleaming silver tea service is brought into the room. It consists of a teapot, a hot water jug, a milk jug, and a sugar bowl. Alongside it comes a beautiful 3-tiered stand, laden with treats. The classic menu follows a specific order. The bottom tier holds savory finger sandwiches, with their crusts neatly cut off. Fillings are delicate cucumber, egg, and cress, or smoked salmon. The middle tier holds the heart of the meal, freshly baked scones. They are served warm, alongside small pots of strawberry jam and thick, rich clotted cream. Even here, there was etiquette and debate. The question of whether to put the jam or the cream on the scone first was a point of regional pride. The Cornish method dictated jam first, while the Devonshire method insisted on cream first. It's a friendly argument that continues to this day. Finally, the top tier presents a dazzling array of small cakes, pastries, and sweets. Tiny iced fancies, fruit tarts, and delicate sponge cakes offer a final, sweet conclusion to the little meal. The sight of the fully laden stand was a feast for the eyes, a promise of comfort and indulgence. The hostess would always pour the tea herself. It was a display of her domestic skill and grace, as she poured the deep, amber liquid into fine bone china cups. the fragrant steam would rise, filling the air with its comforting aroma. There was even a correct way to drink the tea. The cup's handle should be gently pinched between the thumb and forefinger. The popular idea of extending the pinky finger is actually a misconception. It was considered improper. Even stirring the tea had its own rule. One was not to stir in a vigorous circle, which might cause the spoon to clink loudly against the fragile cup. Instead, a gentle back-and-forth motion, from the 6 o'clock to the 12 o'clock position, was the correct and quiet way to do it. These small points of etiquette were all part of the gentle, civilized performance of the ritual. The teas themselves were often black teas, imported from the far corners of the British Empire. Strong Maltai teas from Assam in India, or the more delicate and floral Darjeeling, were popular choices, as were teas from Ceylon. The slightly bitter taste of the tea was perfectly balanced by the addition of milk and sugar. The sweetness of the jam and the savory flavor of the sandwiches. More than anything, afternoon tea was an intimate social occasion. It was the perfect setting for sharing confidences, for catching up on the latest gossip, and for strengthening the bonds of female friendship. In the soft light of a sunlit parlor, surrounded by the gentle clinking of china and the warm scent of scones, the rigid formalities of the day could finally be set aside for a moment of genuine connection and deep comfort. As the afternoon light begins to fade and the day draws to a close, the focus of the home shifts. The social rituals of the outside world are done. Now, the family prepares for the private heart of their day. This transition from day to evening was marked by another crucial ritual, the act of changing one's clothes for dinner. This was not merely a matter of hygiene or comfort. It was a deeply symbolic act, rooted in the core Victorian ideal of separate spheres. This was the belief that men and women had fundamentally different, God-given roles. The public sphere, the world of work, politics, and business, belonged to men. The private sphere, the world of the home, family, and morality, was the domain of women. The home was seen as a sanctuary. It was a haven in a heartless world, a moral refuge from the chaotic, corrupting influence of industrial city life. And within this sanctuary, the wife was the guardian. She was idealized as the angel in the house, a perfect, pious, and submissive figure who was the moral center of the family. The act of changing for dinner was a way of physically marking the transition into this sacred domestic space. A gentleman would literally shed the clothes and the cares of the outside world. Dinner was the formal climax of the day. It was often a multi-course affair, a showcase for the family's prosperity, and, just as importantly, for the wife's skills as a household manager. Everything, from the menu to the polished silver, was a reflection of her competence. The entire family would gather, presenting their most refined selves to one another. A lady's evening dress was far more elaborate than her day dress. It would be made from richer fabrics, like heavy silk, rustling taffeta, or deep velvet. The neckline would be lower, and the sleeves shorter, showing off her neck and arms in the warm glow of the evening's gaslight or oil lamps. Of course, underneath it all, the corset was still an absolute necessity. The process of getting dressed for the evening was a ritual in itself. For a wealthy woman, it was something she could not do alone. Her lady's maid would be there to help. The maid would arrange her hair, and then came the corset. This restrictive undergarment was pulled tight by lacing it up at the back, creating the fashionable hourglass figure. The feeling was one of intense pressure around the waist. Then the heavy evening gown would be put on, and the maid would fasten the dozens of tiny buttons or hooks that ran up the back. A gentleman, too, would change into formal evening wear. By the late Victorian era, this had settled into the familiar uniform of a black dinner jacket or tuxedo with matching trousers, a starched white shirt, and a black bow tie. The crispness of his shirt and the polished shine of his shoes were all part of the evening's performance of civilized order. Dinner conversation was guided by the hostess and followed rules similar to those at a ball supper. Topics were kept light and pleasant. After the final course was cleared, another ritual occurred which perfectly illustrates the separate spheres. The ladies would rise in unison and withdraw from the dining room, leaving the gentlemen behind. This was a physical separation of the sexes. The women would move to the drawing room for coffee, to play music, or to engage in quiet conversation. The men, meanwhile, would remain at the dining table for port, brandy, and cigars. Here, in their exclusively male space, they were free to discuss the topics forbidden in mixed company: politics, business, and finance. The thick smell of cigar smoke and the low rumble of their conversation would be contained in the dining room, separate from the more delicate atmosphere of the ladies in the drawing room. This strict division of roles, which can seem so limiting to us now, was seen by many Victorians as a source of immense stability. It created a world of order, of moral clarity, where everyone knew their place and their purpose. The formal ritual of dressing for dinner was the daily recommitment to this ideal, the moment when the family came together to celebrate the home as a perfect, protected sanctuary. It makes you wonder what small rituals in our own lives give us a sense of comfort and structure. Is it your morning coffee, a walk at a certain time, or something else entirely? I'd be fascinated to hear. Now, let the day's formal structure dissolve as we prepare to explore the private feelings that it so carefully contained. The world of the Victorians, with its formal rituals and public codes, begins to soften. The light in our story grows more gentle, more intimate. We now move beyond the etiquette and the performance to explore the quiet and often secret landscape of the human heart. Here, in the most reflective part of our journey, we will uncover the deep emotions that flourished beneath the polished surface. We will discover a world of intense feeling, of profound love and sorrow, and the resilient spirit that navigated it all. Courtship was perhaps the most thrilling and nerve-wracking process in a young person's life. It was not a world of spontaneous romance, but a carefully managed journey with many steps and constant supervision. An unmarried couple, even one deeply in love, was almost never left alone together. A mother, a chaperone, or another family member was always present, a quiet but constant guardian of propriety. Every interaction took place under this watchful gaze. A gentleman could not simply walk up to a young lady he admired and begin a conversation. Such forwardness would be scandalous. Instead, he required a formal introduction from a mutual acquaintance. This was the first gate he had to pass. Once introduced, he could begin the slow and deliberate process of showing his interest. One of the primary ways to do this was through the ritual of calling. A suitor would make regular afternoon calls to the young lady's home, where he would be received by both her and her mother in the formal drawing room. These visits were a public declaration of his serious intentions. With so many restrictions on spoken words and physical contact, a secret language was needed to express the true feelings of the heart. And the most beautiful of these languages was the language of flowers. known as floriography. This romantic code became wildly popular. Entire dictionaries were published, filled with lists of flowers and their secret meanings, allowing young lovers to have silent and deeply passionate conversations. A bouquet of flowers was never just a simple gift. It was a carefully composed letter. A gentleman would select each bloom with precision, creating a message to be decoded by the recipient. The young woman, upon receiving the flowers, would retreat to her room. With a rustle of pages, she would consult her floral dictionary, her heart beating with anticipation as she translated the secret meaning of his gift. Some meanings were famous. The deep red rose was the most direct and powerful of all statements. It meant, quite simply, I love you. A pink rose offered a more gentle affection, while a yellow rose was more complex, signifying friendship or, in some cases, jealousy. But the language could be far more subtle and poetic. A sprig of lavender tucked into a bouquet spoke of unwavering devotion. A pure white lily symbolized virtue and purity, and a vine of ivy, clinging and constant, was a clear signal of fidelity and the hope of marriage. The arrangement itself could add layers of meaning. A flower that was given upside down would have its meaning completely reversed. So, a red rose, presented with its head pointing to the floor, would signify that love was over. Even the hand that presented the gift was part of the message. A bouquet offered with the right hand was an answer of yes. Offered with the left hand, it meant a regretful no. Imagine the silent, breathless tension of that moment. The heady, sweet fragrance of a bouquet of roses and lilies would fill a drawing room, a constant, aromatic reminder of a suitor's hopes. You can almost see a young woman blushing, her eyes cast down as she accepts the vibrant collection of flowers. You can feel the soft, velvety texture of a rose petal beneath her gloved fingertips, a small, tactile connection to the person who sent it. Of course, flowers were not the only acceptable gifts. A gentleman might send a book of poetry with a particular passage marked. He might gift a piece of sheet music, hoping to hear her play it on the piano at their next meeting. Or, for a grander gesture, he could arrange for a box at the opera. But any gift that was too personal, like jewelry or clothing, was strictly forbidden until a couple was formally engaged. When a gentleman felt his affections were returned, he would prepare for the most important step, the proposal of marriage. Even this was not a simple, private question. More often than not, the proposal was first made in writing, not to the young lady, but to her father. This letter was a serious affair. It would outline the gentleman's financial situation, his prospects, and his honorable intentions. Marriage, after all, was not just a romantic union. It was a social and financial alliance between two families. The young couple would wait in a state of anxious suspense for the father's approval. Only after this approval was granted could the gentleman finally propose to the lady herself. And even then, with their futures now joined, public displays of affection were unthinkable. A kiss on the cheek, or even a stolen kiss on the lips, would only happen in the most private of moments. In public, their physical contact might be limited to her taking his offered arm for a walk, or the brief, thrilling touch of their hands as he helped her into a carriage. In this world of intense restriction, the smallest gestures carried an enormous weight of love and longing. Just as the joys of love and marriage were governed by these strict and gentle codes, so too was life's greatest and most inevitable sorrow. In the Victorian world, death was a constant and familiar presence. mortality rates were high, particularly for children, and so grief was not an occasional visitor, but a central part of the human experience. As such, the process of grieving was not left to chance. It was a highly ritualized public performance with a detailed script that guided the bereaved through their darkest hours. This culture of mourning was famously personified by Queen Victoria herself. After her beloved husband, Prince Albert, died in 1861, she fell into a deep and profound grief. She wore black for the remaining 40 years of her life, setting a somber and influential example for her entire nation. Under her reign, mourning became an elaborate art form. For a widow, the rules were most strict. Her mourning was divided into distinct stages, which could last for more than 2 years. The first period, known as deep mourning, lasted for a year and a day. During this time, she was required to wear full, heavy black clothing. The fabric used was called crepe, a stiff, scratchy material with a dull, non-reflective surface, meant to symbolize the utter absence of joy. She was expected to live in complete social seclusion, receiving only very close family members and refraining from any form of entertainment. The next stage was second mourning, which lasted for about 6 months. Here, the scratchy crepe could be put aside. She could reintroduce fabrics like black silk or wool, and could add slight trims in muted colors like gray, mauve, or deep lavender. She could begin to re-enter society, but only in a very limited way, perhaps attending quiet family gatherings. The final stage, half mourning, lasted for another 6 months. During this time, the muted colors of gray, white, and lavender were fully permissible. After this long, slow, and carefully managed journey, she was finally allowed to return to wearing her normal clothes. For men, the requirements were far less conspicuous. A gentleman in mourning might simply wear a black armband, a black hatband, or a pair of black gloves to signal his loss. This visual language of grief extended to every part of life. A house in mourning would have its curtains drawn. Correspondence had to be written on special mourning stationery, which had a thick black border around the edge of the paper. As the period of mourning progressed, the writer would use stationery with a progressively thinner border, a subtle signal of their slow return to the world. Even jewelry had to conform to the rules. Mourning jewelry was common, often made from dark, somber materials like jet, which is a type of fossilized wood, or a black rubber material called vulcanite. The most personal and cherished pieces were lockets. These lockets, cool and smooth to the touch, would often contain a woven lock of the deceased person's hair, a tangible, physical piece of the loved one, kept close to the heart. The tragically high rate of child mortality meant that countless Victorian families experienced the loss of a child or a young sibling. To preserve the memory of these lost little ones, a practice that seems strange to us was quite common: post-mortem photography. Families would dress their deceased child in their best clothes and pose for one final family portrait. These faint, ghostly images are heartbreaking, but they were born of a deep love, a desperate desire to capture the image of a beloved face before it was lost to memory forever. These rituals, which can seem so morbid to our modern eyes, served a vital and compassionate purpose. They provided a clear social framework for an overwhelming and chaotic experience. When you were lost in grief, you did not have to think about what to do, or what to wear, or how to act. Society gave you a script to follow. The heavy, scratchy crepe dress was a public shield, a clear signal to the world that you were in pain and needed to be treated with gentleness and respect. It was a structured, communal sorrow that held the grieving person and guided them slowly, gently, back to the light. Amidst the thrilling strictures of courtship and the deep, somber rituals of grief, a powerful sense of shared identity emerged. And here we find a great paradox at the heart of Victorian society. Its rigid rules and demanding expectations, which we might see as a restrictive cage, also provided a profound sense of security, of belonging, and of deep comfort. There was a quiet peace in knowing one's place in a predictable and well-ordered world. All the intricate rules of etiquette, from the language of the calling card to the proper way to hold a teacup, created a common language. This language instantly identified who belonged to polite society and who did not. While this could be exclusionary for those on the inside, it fostered a powerful sense of community and mutual understanding. Everyone knew the rules of the game. This shared knowledge created a predictable social landscape which could be navigated with confidence. For those who were unsure of the rules, there was help. Conduct books and etiquette manuals were bestsellers throughout the era. They were eagerly read by the rapidly growing middle classes who aspired to the refined manners and ideals of the aristocracy. These books provided a clear roadmap to social acceptance, detailing every aspect of proper behavior. This shared culture was built around powerful ideals. For men, the ideal was that of the English gentleman. This was a man defined not just by his wealth or his noble birth, but by his character. He was a man of honor, duty, and quiet dignity. He was expected to be brave, yet gentle, to treat all people with respect, and to live his life according to a strict moral code. This became a powerful cultural touchstone, something for boys and men to aspire to. For women, the ideal was the angel in the house, as we have seen. This was a powerful, if limiting, role model for female identity. It centered on moral purity, domestic grace, and a gentle, selfless nature. A woman's purpose was to be the moral compass of her family, creating a peaceful and virtuous home. For many women, fulfilling this role was a source of great satisfaction and a clear life purpose. Shared cultural experiences also helped to weave this tapestry of identity. In an age before broadcast media, families would entertain themselves at home. A very common and beloved activity was for a family to gather in the parlor in the evening, in the warm, golden glow of an oil lamp. A father or mother would read aloud from the latest installment of a novel by Charles Dickens or George Eliot, all across the country. Families were sharing the same stories, laughing at the same characters, and feeling the same suspense. It created a vast, unified cultural conversation. The Church of England also provided a common moral and spiritual framework. The familiar rhythms of the Sunday service, the hymns, and the sermons all reinforced the social norms about duty, charity, and propriety. It provided a shared set of beliefs about the nature of the world and one's place in it. This powerful sense of a shared journey, of being part of a meaningful and well-ordered whole, was a source of immense psychological comfort. And this comfort was needed. The Victorian era was an age of dizzying, almost bewildering, change. The Industrial Revolution was transforming cities, science was challenging old beliefs, and the political world was in constant flux. In the face of all this chaos, the predictable, structured nature of social life was a welcome anchor. It was a shelter from the storm. The system provided a clear map for life's journey, from birth to courtship, marriage to mourning. It reduced uncertainty, and it provided deep comfort in its very predictability, even if that came at the cost of some individual freedom. This journey through the dazzling ballrooms, the quiet daily rituals, and the secret emotional heart of Victorian England has shown us a world of immense and elegant complexity. It would be easy to see these people as puppets of etiquette, their lives dictated by a rigid and unforgiving set of rules. But that would be to miss the truth, for beneath the polished surface and within the gilded cage, a resilient and passionate human spirit was always at work. They were complex individuals who found countless ways to express their love, their ambition, and their personality within the confines of their world. The rise of the novel itself, the era's dominant literary form, is a testament to this. These books were fascinated with the inner lives of individuals, with their complex feelings and moral dilemmas. This reflected a society that was deeply interested in the individual spirit, and that spirit could not be contained forever. Towards the end of the era, the New Woman movement began. Women started to challenge their traditional roles. They fought for the right to an education and began to enter professions that had always been closed to them. Even before this, philanthropy and social reform had become a vital outlet for the energy and intelligence of many upper-class women. It was a way for them to exert real influence in the public world in a way that was seen as morally acceptable. There was also rebellion in the world of art. The aesthetic movement of the late 19th century, with its famous motto, "Art for art's sake," was a direct challenge to the staid, moralistic values of mainstream Victorian society. It celebrated beauty and individual expression above all else. But individuality was not always about grand rebellion. It thrived in the quiet, private spaces of life. The immense popularity of personal diaries and journals, especially among young women, reveals a rich and secret world of individual thought, of private hopes, and of deep emotional reflection. The scratch of a pen moving swiftly across a private diary is the sound of a free mind at work. Even within the strictest social rules, there was always room for personal flair. A clever hostess, known for her witty conversation and perfectly managed dinners, could become a celebrated social star. Her success was not based on birth or wealth alone, but on her individual talent. And we must not forget that the family, while structured and patriarchal, was also idealized as a space of deep and genuine affection. For most Victorians, the emotional bonds of family were the true cornerstone of a happy and meaningful life. Ultimately, individuality found its voice in small, personal choices. A preference for a certain poet, a passion for growing roses in a small garden, or a talent for playing Chopin on the piano. These were the cherished expressions of a unique self. The complex social code was not a machine that crushed the human spirit. It was a stage, an elaborate and beautiful one, on which the timeless human dramas of love, loss, ambition, and friendship were played out with an enduring and deeply felt passion. And so, our journey through the heart of Victorian society comes to a gentle close. We have waltzed in its ballrooms, sat in its parlors, and felt the quiet rhythm of its days. We've seen that behind the strict facade of etiquette was a world of deep feeling, resilient spirit, and a profound search for connection and meaning. Thank you for joining me in this exploration. I hope it has brought you a sense of calm and wonder. As you continue to relax, let these images of a bygone era drift peacefully in your mind. The story is not over, but for now, let's just breathe and be still. The main story of our journey has now been told. The drawing room has grown quiet, the candles have been extinguished, and the last notes of the piano have faded into silence. But our time in the Victorian world is not quite over. Now, as you settle deeper into comfort, we will gently zoom out. We will leave the specific lives we have followed and drift into the broader landscape of the era. This is an epilogue, a scholarly and atmospheric wind down. There is no need to follow a story. Simply let these gentle vignettes of a world in transition wash over you as we explore the forces of industry, science, and the lives of those who existed far beyond the drawing room. The pace will be slow, the details rich, and the atmosphere designed for deep relaxation and for sleep. Let your mind drift and listen to the new sound of the 19th century. It is a sound that begins as a low, distant hum, but grows into a steady, rhythmic roar. It is the sound of the machine. It is the great iron heartbeat of the industrial age. For the Victorians, this was the sound of progress, of power, of a world being remade before their very eyes. In the year 1851, this new world was put on spectacular display in the heart of London. It was called the Great Exhibition, a massive celebration of industrial technology and the might of the British Empire. And it was housed in a building so wondrous it seemed to have been spun from glass and dreams. It was the Crystal Palace. Imagine a structure of cast iron and glass, stretching for nearly a third of a mile. It was a colossal greenhouse, so vast that it enclosed fully grown elm trees within its walls. Sunlight streamed through its thousands of glass panes, illuminating the marvels held within. To wander through the Crystal Palace was to wander through the Victorian imagination. There were mighty steam hammers, capable of shaping immense pieces of iron, yet so precise they could crack a nut without damaging the kernel. There were intricate weaving looms from the textile mills of Manchester, turning out miles of cotton fabric. There were gleaming new scientific instruments, telescopes, microscopes, and telegraph machines that promised to shrink the world and reveal the secrets of the universe. It was a testament to a boundless and confident optimism, a belief that humanity could, through invention, master the natural world. And the greatest of these inventions, the one that truly reshaped the nation, was the steam locomotive. All across Britain, a vast network of iron rails was laid down, a great metal web that connected cities, towns, and remote villages. The railway shrank the country. A journey that once took days by horse-drawn coach could now be completed in a matter of hours. This new mobility changed everything. It allowed people to travel for work, for leisure, and to visit family as never before. The experience of a train journey was itself a new and remarkable thing. Imagine sitting in a carriage, feeling the gentle, rocking motion as the train begins to move. You hear the rhythmic chuffing of the steam engine, a steady, powerful beat. Outside the window, the landscape rushes by, a blur of green fields and distant church spires. You pass over deep valleys on skeletal iron bridges, their latticework a stark and beautiful silhouette against a gray sky. Near a station, the air carries the distinct smell of hot metal, oil, and the faint, pervasive scent of coal smoke. The railways even changed the nature of time itself. Before the trains, every town kept its own local time based on the position of the sun. But for a railway timetable to work, time had to be standardized. And so, railway time, based on the Royal Observatory at Greenwich, was adopted across the country. For the first time, an entire nation was living by the same clock. The relentless rhythm of the machine was replacing the slower, natural rhythms of the sun and the seasons. This new concept of time was extended into the night by another transformative technology: gaslighting. As dusk fell over a city like London, an army of lamplighters would begin their work. With a long pole, they would turn on the gas and light the lamps that lined the streets. A warm, golden, and sometimes eerie glow would push back the darkness. This extended the day, allowing shops to stay open later, and for people to socialize into the evening. It also created the iconic atmosphere we now associate with Victorian London: wet cobblestone streets reflecting the hazy golden light and the swirling mysterious fogs made thicker by the smoke from a million coal fires. This smoke came from the engine of the age: steam. The steam engine powered the factories, the ships, and the trains. It was the literal engine of the British Empire. In the vast, sprawling cities of Manchester and Birmingham, the low hum of machinery was a constant presence. Factories, powered by steam, mass-produced goods on an unimaginable scale. Pottery, furniture, and especially textiles were now cheaper and more widely available than ever before. This allowed the growing middle class to furnish their homes in a style that imitated the aristocracy, filling their parlors with objects and comforts. The world was shrinking in other ways, too. The invention of the telegraph was a miracle of communication. A message could be tapped out in London, travel as an electrical pulse along wires, and arrive in New York or India almost instantaneously. Great undersea cables were laid across the floor of the Atlantic Ocean, connecting continents. For the first time in human history, the world was truly connected in real time. This was an age of heroic engineering. Men like Isambard Kingdom Brunel became national heroes. His bridges, like the breathtaking Clifton Suspension Bridge, which hangs like a spider's thread high above a gorge, were symbols of immense national pride. His steamships, like the SS Great Britain, the first iron-hulled propeller-driven ship to cross the Atlantic, were floating palaces of industrial might. The cold, hard feel of iron, the gritty texture of soot on a windowsill, these were the new textures of this bold and powerful age. But as cities grew, a stark contrast emerged. The immense wealth of the industrialists existed alongside the deep poverty of the slums, a world of smoke and struggle that lay just beyond the elegant squares and terraces. This was the complex, wondrous, and deeply divided world that the roar of the machine had made. This new industrial world, and the wealth it created, gave rise to a powerful and confident middle class. They built large, comfortable houses, and in doing so, created a vast new demand for domestic help. And so, we now drift away from the noise of the factory and pass silently through the green baize door of a grand Victorian home. We are entering the hidden world of domestic service, the quiet, tireless engine that made the elegant lifestyle we have witnessed possible. This is the world of upstairs and downstairs. Domestic service was the single largest employer of women in Victorian England. For millions of young women, a life in service was their most likely path. It was a world of hard work, long hours, and absolute deference, but it also offered a security that was often impossible to find elsewhere. Let us imagine a large house just as the very first light of dawn touches the sky. The family upstairs is deep in sleep, but downstairs, the day has already begun. In a simple, stark room in the attic, a young housemaid is already awake. She dresses quickly in her simple black dress and clean white apron, and makes her way down the dark, narrow back staircase. Her first job is the fires. Every room in the house has a fireplace, and they all need to be cleaned of yesterday's ash and relit so that the house is warm when the family wakes. The world of the servants was governed by a strict and unwritten hierarchy. At the very top were the senior staff, who had authority over all the others. The butler was the king of his downstairs domain. He was the head of the male staff, responsible for the family's priceless silver, which he would polish until it shone. He managed the wine cellar, and at dinner he would oversee the service, a silent, imposing figure standing behind the master of the house. His counterpart was the housekeeper. She managed all of the female staff. Her domain was the linens, the supplies, and the general cleanliness of the great house. She held a large ring of keys at her waist, keys to every storeroom and cupboard. She was a figure of immense authority for the young maids under her command. Deep in the basement, in a world of its own, was the kitchen. This was the kingdom of the cook. The kitchen was a hot, bustling, and often chaotic place. A massive cast-iron stove radiated a constant, intense heat. The air was always filled with the smells of baking bread, roasting meat, and simmering soups. The cook reigned supreme here, a temperamental and powerful figure who commanded a team of kitchen maids and the lowest of all servants, the scullery maid. The scullery maid's life was one of endless, grueling work, scrubbing pots and pans in greasy water from dawn until long after the last dinner plate had been cleared. Some servants had more privileged positions. The lady's maid, for instance, worked directly for the mistress of the house. She did not perform heavy manual labor. Her job was to attend to her lady's wardrobe, to help her dress, and to style her hair. She was a confidant, a keeper of secrets, and lived a life that was a world away from the drudgery of the scullery. The lives of the servants were lived to the rhythm of a different clock. They rose before the sun, and their work was not finished until the family had retired for the night. A day off was a rare luxury, typically just one half-day a week. Their living quarters, usually in the attics for the maids and the basement for the men, were a stark contrast to the opulence upstairs. They were simple, functional spaces, with bare floors and basic furniture. And yet, these two worlds, upstairs and downstairs, were intimately connected. A complex system of bells, called a servant annunciator, was the house's nervous system. In the servants' hall, a large wooden box would be mounted on the wall with a series of small numbers, each corresponding to a room in the house. When a family member pulled a cord in their room, the corresponding number would jiggle, and a bell would ring, summoning a servant to their location. You can imagine the faint, distant jangling of this bellboard, a sound that dictated the constant movement of the unseen staff. As we drift silently through the back corridors, we might catch a glimpse of a maid hurrying by, her footsteps quiet on the floorboards. We might hear the distant sizzle of cooking from the kitchen far below, or smell the clean, sharp scent of lye soap and beeswax used to polish the furniture. We might see a line of perfectly polished boots left outside the gentlemen's bedrooms to be cleaned overnight. This was a world of constant, quiet, and invisible labor. It was a life of immense hardship, but for a young woman from a poor village. A position in a great house offered a roof over her head, 3 meals a day, and a degree of safety. It was a complex world of its own, a silent, beating heart that allowed the elegant life upstairs to exist, while the structures of society were being reshaped by new industries and new classes, the very foundations of belief were also being shaken. Revolutionary new ideas from the world of science were challenging long-held convictions about the world, about God, and about humanity's place in the grand scheme of things. In this next calming chapter, we will explore the quiet, intellectual currents of the age and the deep, spiritual questions that haunted the Victorian mind. In the year 1859, a gentle, unassuming naturalist named Charles Darwin published a book. It was called On the Origin of Species, and it would change the world forever. In its dense, carefully argued pages, Darwin introduced his theory of evolution by natural selection. He suggested that all life on Earth had evolved over millions of years from common ancestors, and that this process was driven by the survival of the fittest. This idea, so central to our understanding of biology today, was a profound shock to the Victorians. It directly challenged the literal biblical account of creation, which stated that God had created the world and all its creatures in 6 days. For a deeply devout and Christian society, this was more than a scientific debate. It was a deep and troubling crisis of faith. This crisis was deepened by other discoveries. Geologists like Charles Lyell were studying rock formations and arguing that the Earth was not just a few thousand years old, as the Bible suggested, but many millions of years old. And from these ancient rocks, paleontologists were unearthing the fossilized bones of gigantic, unbelievable creatures. Dinosaurs? The discovery of these creatures, which were not mentioned in the Bible, further complicated the traditional understanding of history. The discovery of the fossils of early prehistoric humans did so even more. Imagine a Victorian gentleman in his library, the only light coming from the warm glow of a paraffin lamp. The air smells of old paper and leather bindings. He is looking at a heavy scientific book, its pages filled with intricate, detailed drawings of fossils, of strange skeletons and unknown plants. He feels a sense of profound wonder, but also a deep unease. The comfortable, familiar story of the world he was taught as a child is beginning to crumble, replaced by a new story of immense, unimaginable spans of time and of a world governed not by divine plan, but by a long, slow, and often brutal struggle for survival. It is perhaps no surprise that in this age of scientific materialism, and in a time when mortality rates were still so high, an alternative spiritual movement began to flourish. It was called spiritualism, and it was the belief that the spirits of the dead could, and did, communicate with the living. For many who were troubled by the crisis of faith, and for those who were grieving the loss of loved ones, spiritualism offered immense comfort. It was a way to reconcile the new, scientific world with the deep human need for faith, and for reassurance that there was life after death. Seances became a common activity held in the darkened parlors of respectable homes. Imagine a group of people, dressed in their formal evening clothes, sitting around a heavy mahogany table. The room is in complete darkness, save for the flickering light of a single candle. They are all holding hands, their faces a mixture of skepticism and profound hope. They sit in a deep, expectant silence, waiting for a sign, for a message from the world beyond. A person known as a medium would lead the seance. The medium claimed to be able to channel the spirits. They used various techniques to produce supernatural phenomena. There was table tipping, where the heavy table would seem to rock, levitate, or tap out messages with its legs. There was automatic writing, where the medium's hand would seem to be guided by a spirit to write messages. And there were spirit trumpets, long metal horns through which disembodied voices would seem to whisper messages of love and reassurance from the departed. While many mediums were later exposed as frauds, the movement was taken very seriously by millions of people. Even some of the most prominent figures of the age were firm believers. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of the logical and rational Sherlock Holmes, was a passionate advocate for spiritualism. The great naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace, who independently co-discovered the theory of evolution, also believed that the human spirit survived death. Their belief shows just how deep the cultural need was to find meaning and comfort in an age of profound uncertainty. It was a quiet, mysterious, and deeply human quest to understand the great mysteries of life, death, and the vast, silent universe. Beyond the great intellectual debates and the deep spiritual questions, the everyday lives of the Victorians were filled with their own unique and often peculiar passions. In the quiet hours of leisure, they pursued a vast array of hobbies and pastimes, creating a rich and wondrous cultural tapestry. Let us now drift peacefully through the simple pleasures and private imaginative worlds that brought comfort and delight to the Victorian home. One of the most remarkable crazes of the era was a phenomenon known as pterodomania, or fern fever. For some reason, the delicate, intricate beauty of the fern captured the Victorian imagination. People became obsessed with collecting them. They would go on long expeditions to the countryside, scrambling down damp ravines and climbing cliffs to find rare specimens. Back home, these ferns would be cultivated in special miniature greenhouses called Wardian cases, their delicate green fronds unfurling in the filtered light of the parlor. This passion for collecting was part of a broader fascination with the natural world. The Victorian parlor often resembled a small, private museum. It was common to see glass domes on the mantelpiece, containing beautifully preserved and arranged stuffed animals, particularly exotic birds. Enthusiastic amateurs would practice taxidermy, preserving these creatures as permanent monuments to the beauty of nature. People would spend their holidays passionately collecting seashells, a hobby known as conchology, or butterflies, which is called lepidoptery. These collections were then carefully mounted in display cases, a way of ordering and possessing a small piece of the vast and mysterious natural world. The evenings at home were often filled with entertainment. Before the invention of cinema, the magic lantern offered a wondrous and ghostly spectacle. This was an early form of slide projector, which used a lamp to project images painted on glass slides onto a white sheet. Public shows, often called phantasmagoria, would use these lanterns to create terrifying and amazing illusions of ghosts, spirits, and demons appearing in the dark. In the home, they were used to show travel scenes or to illustrate stories, the ghostly, flickering images captivating the whole family. Of course, simpler pleasures were the most common. Parlor games were a staple of home entertainment. After dinner, a family might gather to play a lively game of charades or blind man's bluff, and reading was perhaps the central pastime of all. With the popularization of novels, which were often published in 3 separate volumes or in serialized monthly installments, reading was a shared and beloved activity. For those seeking entertainment outside the home, the music hall was a popular destination. It offered a lively and eclectic variety of acts. There were singers, comedians, acrobats, and magicians, all performing in a loud, joyful, and gaslit atmosphere. And for the more athletically inclined, new sports were becoming fashionable. The gentle, competitive spirit of a game of croquet on a manicured lawn was a perfect afternoon pastime. And later in the era, the invention of the safety bicycle gave both men and women a thrilling new sense of freedom and mobility. Photography was another new invention that quickly became a popular hobby. The process was slow and deliberate, but the magic of capturing a perfect, permanent image of a loved one's face was irresistible. Families would compile large, heavy albums filled with portraits, creating a visual record of their lives. And thanks to the railways, a new kind of leisure was now possible for the middle classes: the seaside holiday. Families could escape the smoke of the city and travel to resorts like Brighton or Blackpool. Imagine the thrill of arriving at the coast. The air smells fresh and salty. You can hear the cry of gulls and the gentle, rhythmic sound of the waves washing onto the pebble beach. It was a world of simple pleasures, of donkey rides, Punch and Judy shows, and walks along the pier. It was a world of quiet satisfaction, found in the simple act of pressing a flower in a scrapbook, or the peaceful wonder of watching the tide come in. The Victorian age was so much more than drawing rooms and etiquette. It was a world of smoke and steam, of new ideas that shook the foundations of belief, and of quiet passions pursued in the gentle hours of leisure. This broader landscape, with all its complexity and wonder, now fades into a peaceful backdrop. As you continue to unwind, let these gentle echoes of the past guide you toward a deep and restful sleep. There is still more to discover, but there is no hurry at all, and so the house is still. The characters of our story have all taken their leave, and the great historical forces have receded into a quiet hum. All that is left are the gentle echoes, the faint whispers of a time gone by. This final part of our journey is a collection of those echoes. It is a scrapbook of curiosities and footnotes, with no story to follow and no destination to reach. The structure is loose and dreamlike, a series of calm vignettes for you to drift in and out of as you please. The only goal now is to let the mind wander, to let go of the day, and to sink into a deep and peaceful rest. The tone will be at its most soothing, the pace at its most unhurried. Let these final, gentle thoughts be the soft, quiet pillow on which you finally fall asleep. Let us drift, for a moment, to the city of London in the middle of the 19th century. Let us imagine the summer of the year 1858. It was a summer of intense and oppressive heat. The sun beat down on the stone buildings and the dusty streets. The air was thick, heavy, and still, and from the great river that flowed through the heart of the city, a powerful and unbearable smell began to rise. This was the beginning of an event that would be remembered in history as the Great Stink. The River Thames, for centuries the lifeblood of London, had, by this time, become its open sewer. All the waste of a city of millions was poured directly into its waters. In the relentless heat of that summer, the slow-moving, polluted river began to ferment under the sun. The stench that it emitted was overwhelming. It was a thick, foul blanket that settled over the entire city, a heavy presence in the air that could not be escaped. The smell was so powerful that it brought the business of government to a halt. In the Houses of Parliament, which stand on the banks of the Thames, politicians could not work. They ordered that the curtains be soaked in chloride of lime, a chemical disinfectant, and hung over the windows in a desperate attempt to block out the foul air. The measure failed. There was even serious talk of abandoning the City of London altogether, of moving the entire government to a place where the air was clean. This crisis was viewed through the lens of the prevailing medical theory of the day. It was known as the miasma theory. Doctors and scientists believed that diseases like cholera, which periodically ravaged the city, were not spread by germs or contaminated water. They were spread, it was thought, by bad smells, by foul air, or miasma. This theory, while entirely incorrect, created a sense of extreme urgency. For the people of London, the Great Stink was not just unpleasant. It was a sign that the very air they breathed was sick, and that a terrible plague could be unleashed at any moment. And so, this mistaken belief, paradoxically, spurred a brilliant and lasting solution. The Great Stink finally forced the politicians of the day to act. They approved a public works project of a scale that had never been seen before. They would build a completely new sewerage system for the entire city of London. The man tasked with this monumental undertaking was a quiet, methodical, and brilliant engineer named Joseph Bazalgette. His plan was both simple and audacious. He would build a network of massive intercepting sewers running parallel to the river. These great brick tunnels, deep underground, would catch the city's waste before it could reach the Thames. This waste would then be carried by the gentle force of gravity far to the east of the city, where it could be released into the river on the outgoing tide and carried harmlessly out to sea. The construction was a marvel of Victorian engineering. For years, the city was filled with the distant, steady sound of construction, of excavation, of thousands of men working deep beneath the ground. Over 1,300 miles of sewers were built, a hidden, subterranean world of brick and mortar. If you could have walked through these tunnels as they were being built, you would have felt the cool, damp air on your skin. You would have smelled the clean scent of wet clay and fresh mortar. You would have seen the beautiful, geometric patterns of the millions of bricks, all perfectly laid by hand, stretching away into the darkness. Joseph Bazalgette was a man of immense foresight. When designing the system, his calculations showed that he needed pipes of a certain diameter. Then, it is said, he doubled the diameter and said, "Well, we're only going to do this once, and there's always the unforeseen." He insisted on using the highest quality of materials, like strong and durable Portland cement. It is because of this quiet genius, this insistence on quality and foresight, that the very same sewers he built are still in use today, serving the city of London more than a century and a half later. As part of this vast project, the banks of the Thames were transformed. The construction of the great sewer lines was combined with the reclaiming of land from the muddy riverbanks. This created the iconic Victoria and Albert embankments, the wide, tree-lined riverside walkways that are now such a beloved feature of the city. Where there was once polluted mud and a terrible smell, there were now pleasant promenades, with new gas lamps casting a gentle glow on the water. The Great Stink, a crisis born of filth, had, through quiet and methodical effort, resulted in a cleaner, healthier, and more beautiful city. The problem, so large and overwhelming, had been solved by a slow, ingenious, and invisible masterpiece of engineering. From the world of grand public works and the problems of the city, our thoughts now drift to the quieter, more intimate world of the individual. We turn our minds to the strange and sometimes unsettling beliefs that governed Victorian medicine, and the peculiar and often dangerous habits that were pursued in the name of beauty. We observe these practices now from a safe and peaceful distance, with a sense of calm and gentle curiosity. In the Victorian parlor, the ideal of female beauty was one of extreme delicacy and fragility. A pale, almost translucent complexion was highly prized. It was a sign of a life of leisure, untouched by the sun, and it hinted at a sensitive, romantic soul. To achieve this ghostly pallor, women would sometimes turn to a very dangerous substance, arsenic. Arsenic, a well-known poison, was widely available and surprisingly common in Victorian cosmetics. It was marketed in small, carefully controlled doses, with the promise of creating a beautiful, pale complexion. Women could buy wafer-thin discs of arsenic, which were meant to be eaten like a candy. These poisonous wafers promised to remove freckles and blemishes, and to give the skin a fashionable, luminous quality. Another tool in this pursuit of ethereal beauty was the flower known as belladonna, or deadly nightshade. Small drops of a belladonna solution were applied to the eyes. The effect was to cause the pupils to dilate, creating a wide-eyed, dark, and dramatic look that was considered very fashionable. The woman who used it, however, would have to endure blurry vision and an inability to focus on anything up close. It was a sacrifice made for a fleeting, fashionable glance. This ideal of fragility was so pervasive that appearing to be in a state of delicate health was considered attractive. A look known as interesting involved cultivating an appearance of being prone to fainting spells or gentle melancholy. It was a performance of sensitivity, a beauty rooted in the appearance of weakness. The medical beliefs of the time could be just as strange. For much of the era, the practice of phrenology was treated as a serious science. A phrenologist would carefully examine the bumps and contours of a person's skull. It was believed that these shapes corresponded to different parts of the brain, and that by reading them, one could determine a person's character, their talents, and their moral failings. Imagine the quiet intimacy of a phrenological examination, the gentle touch of the practitioner's hands, and the earnest, reassuring voice as they revealed the secrets held by the shape of your head. For more physical ailments, old cures persisted. Bloodletting, a practice that had been used for centuries, was still a common treatment. A doctor might apply leeches to a patient's skin to bleed them, in the belief that this would cure a wide variety of illnesses, from fevers to headaches. This was also the great age of patent medicines. These were unregulated, commercially produced remedies that were marketed as cure-alls for any and every ailment. Their bottles, with their elaborate and colorful labels, were a common sight in every home. Many of these medicines contained high levels of alcohol, opium, cocaine, or morphine. They did little to cure any disease, but they were very effective at making the patient feel better for a short time. A particularly popular remedy for teething babies was a product called Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup. It was advertised as a gentle, calming tonic for fretful infants. It was, in fact, a potent mixture of syrup and morphine. For women suffering from what was vaguely diagnosed as hysteria or nervous conditions, a strange and isolating treatment was often prescribed. It was called the rest cure. It involved a woman being confined to her bed for weeks, or even months, on end. She was not allowed to read, to write, or to have visitors. She was forced into a state of absolute rest and sensory deprivation. Even the colors of the age could hold a hidden danger. A vivid emerald green became a very fashionable color for dresses, ribbons, and even for wallpaper. This beautiful, vibrant green was often created using a dye that was based on arsenic. A woman wearing a green dress could be slowly poisoned by the arsenic rubbing off on her skin. And in a room decorated with green wallpaper, the dye could flake off as dust, or turn into a poisonous gas when it was damp. slowly poisoning the inhabitants. The most beautiful things in this world of quiet refinement could sometimes hold the most dangerous secrets. While some Victorians pursued these strange regimes of beauty and health, others channeled their immense energies into a different kind of passion. This was the great age of the collector. We now drift peacefully into the cluttered, lamplit world of the Victorian parlor, and observe the sometimes obsessive and occasionally morbid collecting manias of the time. Let us reflect on how they saw the world as a vast and wonderful place, one to be explored, categorized, owned, and displayed. The desire to collect was, in part, a way to make sense of the world. Science and empire were revealing new lands, new cultures, and new species at a bewildering rate. To collect was to impose order on this chaos. A cabinet of curiosities was a common feature in a wealthy home. It was a piece of furniture with many small drawers and shelves, and in it a collector would display their treasures. Opening a drawer might reveal a strange shell from a distant ocean, a fossil found in a local cliff face, or an archaeological fragment from an ancient ruin. One of the most common and most sentimental things to collect was human hair. In an age before photography was common, a lock of hair was a tangible, physical memento of a loved one. But this went far beyond simple locks of hair. Intricate and beautiful objects were crafted from the hair of family members, both living and dead. Wreaths, made to look like delicate floral arrangements, were woven from the hair of an entire family, each flower made from a different person's locks. Jewelry, such as bracelets and brooches, was also common. These intricate, web-like creations were then framed under glass, a permanent and deeply personal record of family connection. Some collecting habits were stranger and more morbid. There was a rare but real practice known as anthropodermic bibliopagy. This was the binding of books in human skin. This was usually reserved for anatomical textbooks, which might be bound in the skin of a dissected cadaver, or for the trial records of a notorious criminal bound in the murderer's own skin as a final, strange act of justice. Following the great archaeological discoveries in Egypt, a craze for all things Egyptian swept through society. This led to a very peculiar form of entertainment known as a mummy unwrapping party. A wealthy individual who had acquired an ancient Egyptian mummy on their travels would invite guests to their home. There, in the drawing room, the ancient linen wrappings would be slowly and carefully removed to reveal the preserved body within. It was a strange mix of scientific curiosity and morbid social spectacle. The world of plants also inspired its own mania. It was called orchidilirium, an obsession with collecting and cultivating rare and exotic orchids. These flowers, with their strange, almost alien beauty, became symbols of status and refinement. Collectors would pay vast fortunes for a single, rare specimen, and orchid hunters, the men who sourced these plants, would risk their lives in remote jungles around the world to find new and undiscovered varieties. The passion for collecting extended to all corners of the natural world. The collecting of birds' eggs was a widespread hobby among boys and men, a practice that sadly had a devastating impact on the populations of some rare birds. People would fill albums with collections of seaweed or pressed flowers, each one carefully labeled with the date and location where it was found. These collections were often housed in scrapbooks. Sentimental scrapbooking was an incredibly popular pastime, especially for women. They would fill large, heavy albums with all manner of ephemera. There were poems copied out in beautiful script, small watercolor sketches, printed scraps from magazines, and of course, pressed flowers from a memorable walk or a special bouquet. To turn the brittle, age-browned pages of one of these scrapbooks is to touch a quiet, forgotten world of private memories. The faint, musty scent of old paper and dried plants hangs in the air, a perfume of time itself. In the profound silence of a room filled with these collections, every object holds a story, a quiet testament to a life lived, and a world seen through curious and passionate eyes. From the quiet collections held within the home, we take one final, gentle look at the people who populated this fascinating and complex era. Our journey is almost at an end. And so, in our final chapter, we will calmly gaze upon a few last portraits of notable Victorians. This will not be a detailed history. Think of it, instead, as a series of gentle, dreamlike sketches, a final human connection to the age, as you drift completely and peacefully into sleep. Let us imagine a quiet gallery filled with faded, sepia-toned photographs and rich, romantic paintings. Our first portrait is of a woman in a simple, dark dress. She holds a lamp, and its light casts a soft glow on her calm, determined face. This is Florence Nightingale, the lady with the lamp. She is remembered as a compassionate nurse, but she was also a brilliant and revolutionary statistician. She understood that more soldiers in the Crimean War were dying from disease and poor sanitation than from their wounds. Her meticulous collection of data and the pioneering charts she created to display it revolutionized the field of nursing and saved countless lives. We see her not in a chaotic hospital, but walking alone down a long, dark, quiet corridor, her lamp a small, steady beacon of reason and compassion. Next, we see two figures together. A man, Charles Babbage, a brilliant mathematician, stands beside a complex and beautiful machine of brass and iron gears. This is his difference engine, a mechanical calculator that was the ancestor of the modern computer. Beside him is a young woman, Ada Lovelace, the daughter of the poet Lord Byron. She was a gifted mathematician who understood the true potential of Babbage's work. She realized that such a machine could do more than just calculate numbers. It could manipulate any kind of symbol. We can almost hear the quiet scratching of her pen as she writes her detailed notes, the notes that would lead her to be remembered as the world's first computer programmer. We move to a painting, one of intense, jewel-like colors. It shows a scene of romantic, almost photographic detail. This is the work of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, a group of young artists who rebelled against the artistic conventions of their day. They painted scenes from literature and myth with a vibrant and passionate intensity. Our gaze then falls on a flamboyant figure, a man with long hair holding a single lily. He is Oscar Wilde, the celebrated wit and playwright. He was a leader of the aesthetic movement, which celebrated beauty above all else. We can almost hear the sound of his clever, gentle laughter echoing from a long-forgotten dinner party, a sound that challenged the stern and moralistic tone of his time. We turn to a portrait of a woman who was not an aristocrat or a famous artist. She is Mary Anning, a working-class woman from the seaside town of Lyme Regis. From a young age, she had a remarkable talent for finding fossils. It was she who discovered the first complete skeletons of the great sea reptiles, the ichthyosaur and the plesiosaur. We picture her on a cold, gray, windy beach, wrapped against the elements, the sound of the waves crashing behind her as she patiently taps away at a rock. revealing the secrets of a world millions of years old. And finally, we come to the portrait of the woman who gave her name to the age, Queen Victoria. We see her not as the young, vibrant queen, but as the figure she became for most of her reign, a small, solemn woman, dressed in the permanent black of mourning for her beloved husband, Albert. Her face is etched with the lines of grief and immense responsibility. She was a monarch who experienced profound personal sorrow, yet who ruled with quiet determination over a vast global empire. During a period of the most unprecedented and bewildering change the world had ever seen, she is the still, quiet center of this entire, complex world. The sounds of the ballroom have long since faded. The clink of teacups has fallen silent. The world of Victorian England, with all its elegance, its curiosities, and its resilient heart, now recedes into the quiet landscape of dreams. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. I hope this story has brought you comfort and a peaceful state of mind. If you've enjoyed our journey and would like to support the channel, please consider liking this video and subscribing so we can continue to explore these wonderful worlds together. But for now, there is nothing left to do, nothing to think about, just the gentle darkness, the comfort of your bed, and the deep, restorative sleep that awaits. Sleep well. Good night.